Hello all and welcome to Shatter Our Souls with Novaria. Now today we are of course tackling what we were heading for last time, which is I want to deal with the Yunobo side of the equation. Now, Yunobo is one of the characters that is part of the Varudanya main quest. Effectively, before we can begin the quest proper, we must first gain the ability to find and help Yunobo, who is currently trapped at the abandoned mine to, I believe it is the north of the Goron city. This is all well and good. This is all positive in my books. But there's a couple small details that we have to deal with while we're here. The first and foremost is I can't even remember if I talked to the head honcho here, because if I didn't talk to the head honcho, then that means that I may or may not have to turn around and go to not back to the Goron city simply to have access to challenging the latter half of everything. But no big deal, right? It's just the way it is. Or is it? Oh, wow. Exquisite aim. Anywho, if we have talked to Bluto, then theoretically, Yunobo will be up at the top here, ready to be rescued as only the bravest of Gorons can be. If not, then I'll be making a quick jaunt back to Goron City, and we will figure it out from there. Overall, now that we're actually in and on Death Mountain, a couple things come to mind that are perhaps a little bit concerning. Yeah, Yunobo is not here. Okay, cool. Well, might as well loot the chests while I'm here. Anywho, as I was saying, getting into this area in and of itself, not a huge issue. Now that we have all the armor, we can begin taking apart each of the individual shrines one after another. Assuming that there's not going to be some major flaw that I'm just not foreseeing as part of the shrine quest, it should be rather reasonable to go through and beat each of the shrines. Oh no. This doesn't bode well. So, I remember that you have to find and save Yunobo, but I'm realizing that the cannon can twist, and if it can twist, then that theoretically means that I might not actually be able to save Yunobo at all, which would mean that the last and most likely of the four divine beasts that I believe are possible to defeat is a no-go, meaning that this will be a 0 divine beast run instead of a 1 or 2. And that doesn't bode well for me right now, because that also means that no matter what I do, I'm going to kind of be stuck in a not so great situation. Anywho, Drak here is just kind of watching over the area. And he is, of course, watching over the head honcho's cannon. Head honcho is a Goron by the name of Bluto, I believe his name is. It's very suave chap, very strong-willed, as all Gorons are. But I suppose what I should get at, before anything else, is a quick explanation of why certain shrines may or may not be possible. The number one, I suppose, wall that we have to get through with any given shrine is, does it require a bow? Swords often have a moment or a way around them that are reasonable to take down as a average player. However, anything that requires a bow means that theoretically there is something out of reach. And something out of reach is very vague for a reason. Because just having something just out of reach isn't the end of the world. But having something that is out of reach that you require a bow to get becomes a lot more concerning when you consider the fact that bows are one of the 3 weapon types that are theoretically not allowed for this run. There are, of course, 3 weapons that, if push comes to shove for the completion of the run, I will use, but I will only use these 3 weapons. These being the Master Sword, which I'm pretty sure I will gather before fighting the final boss, but will not actually use as much as possible. The second is potentially the Hylian Shield. Yeah, this is what I thought. The great and strong Goron is stuck inside what looks to be a piece of bedrock, and the only cannon that can actually reach this area fires in the wrong direction. So, instead of trying to muck about with that, I guess we're going after a different shrine while I try and ponder a solution. Because if my recollection is accurate, I can't just push it. I can't just hit it randomly. It has to be something that is very forceful, typically with a hammer-style weapon, in order to access and, of course, switch the tracks it's on. Anyways. With all of that being said, shrines that require bows, shields, and or swords are a problem. The one that comes to mind that requires a sword being one of the flame lights the way type shrines, whereas you have a blue flame that you have to guide between different water sources and whatnot throughout the duration of the section of the game. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's not something that I'm necessarily going to be upset about having to go around, but it is something that potentially could be a problem. Oh. You mean this shrine? The Blue Flame Shrine? Well, no time like the present. So the Blue Flame Shrine was one that I had assumed, or I assumed right from the get-go, would be impossible without some ludicrous divine luck. And to kind of iterate my point, the Blue Flame has 2 means of transportation. Either wooden weapons, such as a torch, or arrows, which I'm also not allowed to use. And so I end up in this lovely circumstance where the only feasible way to continue through the game as a whole, or through this shrine, is effectively to use the wind bombs glitch. Now, wind bombs aren't necessarily a bad thing, but it is something that is outside the realm of my personal skill level. As a result, I would rather not fuss with those too much yet, until I can get a little more practice under my belt. So for now, I guess we're going to have to turn around and go to another shrine. Something that's a little more inside the realm of expectations for me. So anyways, as I was saying, it has to be something a little more within the realm of expectations for me as a player. While I personally understand that there are shrines that can be completed using wind bombs as a primary solution, I myself lack the skill required to pull it off. I am, for lack of better terms, not a speedrunner, and I doubt I ever will be. To me, speedrunning, while an art and a very unique way of playing games and enjoying them, just has never been my cup of tea. But that's not the end of the world. There are 3-4 more shrines in this area that would be worthwhile getting into, and potentially could help us. The first one is just up the road here, to the left of the bridge that Bluto would have us fire Yonobo at, to access the trial of sorts to defeat Varudanya. Theoretically, each of these 4 shrines that I can think of off the top of my head here have something unique about them that will help us through this rather trying time. This first one, if my memory serves, is a very simple point A, point B style shrine. Nothing really outside the realm of expectations. Next, we have the Gut Check Rock Shrine, which, insofar as I don't flub up, climbing Gut Check Rock should be no big deal. Oh, wow, that was absolutely terrible. The third, I believe there's one in the one on Death Mountain that is effectively balanced scales to be able to access. And to be able to access the end of the shrine, which may require tools that I simply don't have access to. And lastly, if there is one called a Brother's Feast, it's a side quest of sorts, where you effectively have to talk to a couple of Gorons and bring one of them a meal. Bringing the meal to the Gorons as a whole is not a huge issue. This is just Tuesday for Link. What is an issue for that particular one is maintaining the distance necessary from other enemies and whatnot throughout the run. Anywho, there we go. And stalled flight complete. That was pretty easy. Huh. Should do that more often. Anyways, with stalled flight done, there are 3 left. And I think I'm going to go after a Brother's Feast first. This is one that I always enjoyed as a general statement, just because a Brother's Feast was meant to be a more light-hearted take on the Gorons. Gorons, for some reason, always have kind of 3 basic, I suppose, mentalities thrown at them when it comes to the game design. The first is that they're Gorons. They are rock, they're hard-headed, they like their muscles and whatnot. And that's a perfectly reasonable thing to go with. That's a good archetype. Second is that they're stubborn. They tend to have a will as hard as stone. And I personally like this aspect of the characters. It makes them, in some ways, very relatable. In some ways, very hard to deny the help that they so desperately need. And the third basic mentality is that they are also very commonly hungry. And being an individual who has at one point or another been hungry once or twice, I can't help but decide to help these lovable Gorons throughout their adventures or misadventures to the best of my abilities. The Brother's Feast, or Brother's Roast, is just that, an attempt to help feed a Goron by effectively bringing a rock roast, a very special cut of rock, to be cooked by a brother and served to another. That's all it really is. And yet, this one somewhat silly task ends up being one of my favorite just on the basis of it's relatable. It's interesting to a degree because you, the player, get to see exactly how these Gorons exist, how they live, what even they eat. Because we've known since Ocarina of Time that they eat rock. But is it just any old slab of granite? Or is it something more specific? We know, for example, that we eat rocks. We need iron in our diet. We need salt. These are minerals. We need them in some capacity or another. Therefore, how much do they need? So, the reason I kind of want to touch upon this is because there are two notable types of rock that they have eaten throughout the direction or the mentality of this game. Not mentality. The duration of the game. There we go. Woofty woofty. I'm having a hard day with words. The first is the quote-unquote rock sirloin. Now, I suppose there's three. There is the rock sirloin, which is brought about in Hyrule Warriors to heal Darunia in a battle. I know, we're bringing out Hyrule Warriors. Secondly, we have the prime rock roast. Now this, to me, looks very similar to a hammer style roast. Bone sticking out of one end, meat on the other. It is effectively just a slab of meat or rock for these people to eat right off the bone. The third is the marbled rock roast, which comes about in Tears of the Kingdom as part of marbled Goma, which is an entirely different beast altogether and something that is very difficult to talk about. But effectively, the rock roasts of the marbled Goma are more like they cause the Gorons to lose sight of themselves, is the easiest way of putting it. Gorons are very true to themselves, but when they end up with these marbled rock roast, they end up being very... I don't want to say they're lazy. That's not what it is. It is simply that they lose their ambition. They have one thing on their mind and one thing only, which is very simply that they must eat more. That's all it is to it. And yet, knowing this doesn't necessarily do much. We know very well that each of the Gorons are going to have their own unique, I suppose, flavor palette. Now, why I kind of wanted to analyze the meat and or the rock roast itself is because I am a meat cutter by trade. And the closest, I suppose, cut to a rock roast would be something like a beef or lamb leg. And while that might not be everybody's cup of tea, a beef leg or a lamb leg would be a appropriate comparison based on the marbling, based on the size, etc. Now, don't get me wrong, I also kind of have to question how they cook these things, because one moment it's on the grill and it's absolutely stone cold, and the next moment it's filled with magma. So, it really makes me question what these guys actually do to the rock roasts to make them so... I suppose the right word would be edible, considering how inedible the source would actually be. Anywho, we have the rock on the bone ready for these dear brothers. And this challenge, now that we've got it started, I love this challenge. It's simple, it's to the point. Get a rock roast from point A to point B. The bottom of the hill to the top. That's all your task is. But if at any point in time you get knocked down, the roast will fall into the magma below, forcing you to redo the entire run up the hill. Simple, the stakes are reasonably high, there's enough going for the player that you could, in theory, run up the hill, defeat all the monsters, come back down, grab the roast, and run back up. This is very easily a solution to the problem. Or you can be stubborn, like me. Grab the roast and run. And if you grab the roast and run, you have to dodge arrows, falling boulders, moblins that are aiming to kick you in the shins, as well as the flame chew jellies. All of which are, I'd say, irritating enough on their own. Combined becomes a very difficult situation. I'm sorry, he hit the roast and it cooked me. He cooked me through the roast. Oy vey. Anywho. With that, we are, of course, heading up the mountain. Now, the other side of the thing is, theoretically, because the Gorons eat rock, any kind of rock could be edible. It'd be the same thing as, like, how do I want to put it? There are many different ways to eat different types of food. Grains, your meats, your dairies, your whatnot. There are many different things that are edible, but there are only certain numbers or certain kinds of foods that are considered the best of the best. And in this case, this lovely rock roast is, of course, one of the best. And as I say, 5, 4, 3, 2, solid rock filled with magma. The outside casing is still fine as well. Like, they expertly grilled that. And how he can tell that the grilled rock roast was ready when it's just a pile of hot rock really confuses me. Anywho, a brother's roast grants us access to a shrine in behind. One that is effectively just a simple blessing shrine. And there are, of course, a number of these. A large number of these blessing shrines. But the one thing I like is that the blessing shrines actually do a really good job of incentivizing overworld exploration. Something that I think didn't really get the time of day in certain games the way it should have. Knowing this, these blessing shrines, while short, sweet, act as... how do I want to put it? It's not necessarily incentive. It acts as a gift. You get what you came for. A weapon, typically, or treasure. Or not. Typically, it gives you a treasure and a orb. And the treasure and orb system actually works really well. Because it shows that, yeah, you can go through A or B, and that's fine. You get your treasure, typically a sword or a new form of weaponry, a bow. And then you get effectively, your big upgrade. The shrine reward for talking to the big head honcho at the end. Ow. All this is to say that you do get a lot out of these circumstances. Greedy Hill is technically not a blessing shrine, but it is about as close to a blessing shrine as a non-blessing shrine gets. You get some treasure, you get what you're after, and then you're off to the races for the next treasure hunting escapade that you get to go on. Our next target is one that was actually bleeping at us on the way over to Goron City. It is, if my memory serves, a shrine in the middle of a lake of lava. The only way to or from is by effectively building a bridge out of steel through the magma itself to be able to access one side or the other. Perfect. No big deal. This is actually something that comes up a lot now that I think about it. In a large number of Zelda in general, you come across this moat this problem that needs to be surpassed by creating a bridge of some variety. Now, in games like Twilight Princess, this is literally just pulling the bridge from one end of the world to the other and saying, here you go, have fun with it. In other games, like I'm going to use Wind Waker, your path forward isn't always building a bridge, but breaking one. Yeah, that little puzzle in Dragon Roost Cavern absolutely stumped me forever. But we also have other games like, I'm going to go with Echoes of Wisdom, where creating a bridge is both the simplest solution and also one of the most fulfilling, if not silliest. Because sure, you can build a bridge out of virtually anything, but why not build a bridge out of beds? Why not build a bridge from the mainland to the Zora Kingdom out of beds? Because that's what works. It's so ridiculous and yet works so wonderfully that I can't help but question why it doesn't get used more often as a game mechanic as a whole. The other one is, of course, the... how do I want to word this? Tears of the Kingdom bridges. Now, as I mentioned way at the beginning of all this, the inspiration for trying to take away all of Link's powers, well, all of Link's more stereotypical capabilities, and be left with his powers was due to the Ultra Hand. The Ultra Hand, for lack of better terminology, was one of, if not the most powerful tool imaginable. It does a little bit of everything. It helps with navigation, it helps with breaking through enemy defenses, and sure, absolutely, can you stop every now and again and you have to break through defenses in a different way? Absolutely. But regardless of what enemy you're facing, there is a combination of tools for the job. Minoru needs a new weapon. Congratulations, you get to fuse two items together. You need to break a rock. Okay, let's fuse two items together. Okay, you need to wash off Mukta rock. Let's fuse two items together. And so, what we end up with is that the Ultra Hand as a very basic tool becomes by far and away the single most versatile tool in Zelda history. Just on the case of it's a game design choice meant to give as much freedom as possible in a game that was already very much about giving the player all the freedom in the world. And so what started out was a haha became more of a how far could we take this mentality? How far could we take this and have it still work? And does it work in other games? And so beating Breath of the Wild with the minimum number of basic weapons necessary, to me, is exactly the kind of thing that I would want to do to showcase just how overpowered the game's different tools become. Because even in Breath of the Wild, Link's kit and capabilities were far surpassing the capabilities of the prior Links in A Link to the Past, in Ocarina of Time, Twilight Princess. Yeah, okay, there are a couple details that need to be taken care of. Link needs certain tools in certain capacity. You need the boomerang to get through the forest temple in Twilight Princess. Link has boomerangs. You need the lantern to light torches. You need the grappling hook to get from point A to point B. You need to use each of these tools in a very specific way. Why do you need the grappling hook when you have wind bombs? Why do you need the bow and arrow proper or rather, why do you need bomb arrows, wasting both bombs and arrows when you could just get bomb arrows, or magic arrows, flame arrows, ice arrows, light arrows, ancient arrows? Each of these become a different subset of capabilities within Link's toolkit. And it does get to a point where this Link becomes incredibly overpowered just because there aren't many limitations to this character. Limitations often make for good writing, good storytelling. Certain characters are just omniscient, omnipotent, omnipotent? That's the word. Effectively capable of doing whatever they see fit. This particular Link, when thrown at a problem at the right angle, can do virtually anything. And I say that within context of this game because even what Tears of the Kingdom gives far surpasses anything that Breath of the Wild gives. And on the surface, they look like much the same set of tools to a degree. You have the Ultra Hand, which allows Link to create items out of surrounding objects. This can include, but is not limited to, creating boats out of driftwood. This is able to create machines that will travel from one end of the world to the other at breakneck speeds. You have entire sections of the world devoted to just playing the game properly. You have entire puzzles dedicated to using the right tool for the job, like using a fire hydrant to put out a lava moat so that you are able to walk across said moat. And that's all well and good. You have the Ultra Hand, which acts as magnesis and can include things like bombs on said objects, meaning that your bomb supply, while now limited compared to what the Sheikah Slate did, is far from limited. You have the fuse ability, which can fuse any two objects together, including weapons and monster parts. You have the ability to reverse time on objects, but not people. And you gain the ability to travel through solid objects as if you were swimming through rock. This is the core set of abilities for the for the Tears of the Kingdom version of Link. But then, going even further than that, Tulin's capability of creating wind gusts is very similar to Revali's Gale. One goes vertical, one goes horizontal. You have Yunobo's shield in one game, and the flame charge in the other. One acting offensively, the other defensively. You have Sidon's capability of creating a shield versus Mipha's Grace. One that heals you, and one that acts as almost like the Mega Man Leaf Shield, where you can attack after you have defended from something else. But even then, it's still not unheard of. It's still not excessive. No, it is incredibly excessive. This Link can do virtually anything. And as far as Links go in this entire franchise, Breath of the Wild Tears of the Kingdom Link is by far my pick for the strongest. Just on the merit of what he actually accomplishes throughout his now 3 games. In one of them, he is playing a Hyrule Warrior style battle where every enemy can be hit for one shot or battled down with next to no extra effort put in. You have the Breath of the Wild battles, which are much more strategic, but he has the raw power to stop a charging Lynel. You have the Tears of the Kingdom side of things, where he can now create giant mechs, because why not? And this isn't a bad thing, but it makes this Link very difficult to actually put an idea of how strong he would actually be, because the limitations of this specific Link are not as clear-cut as some of the other characters in gaming. The limitations of a character like, I'm going to point at Samus Aran here, are difficult to pin down, but very well defined. But to put a character like Link next to Samus Aran, people would automatically say Samus would win, because Samus has the range. But I'm not so sure. What gives Samus her raw strength is both the range and the capabilities of her power suit. But Link's power is not about besting his opponent one-to-one. It's about redirecting his opponent's power in some cases. Using the Shield Bash ability could theoretically send Samus's projectiles back at her, without leaving a scratch on this Link at all. He could effectively create flamethrowers or other tools capable of fighting Samus one-on-one. Anyways, if you like what you see, I would love if you left a like, a subscribe, and maybe leave a question down in the comments for what you would like to see in the future, or what you'd like discussed. Anyways, that's all for now. I hope you all have a fantastic night. And until next time, have a good one.